cancel button. I've created an event on the OK button. That just goes into this VB script here. Just checks to see if you've entered a password and tells you if you need to enter a password. It checks that you've entered a username, that it exists in a database. If the password checks out against what's in the database, then it opens up the contact list as your sort of main form, and it closes itself here. So let's give it a whirl. So I'm going to put in Steve1, it doesn't exist, and it tells you this does not exist. Get the administrator to create you an account. Let's try Steve. Let's put the wrong password in. And it just doesn't allow you in. You could have a message there to say the password is incorrect, please try again. I'll put the right password in now, and lo and behold, our contact list opens up. So that is all there is to it. If you want to look at the code, and I'll just leave it there for you to have a peruse. At some point we will be maintaining a temporary table locally where we'll set the name of the user that's logged in, and that's going to be useful for tracking what he does. Okay. Okay, so we've got our login form. What we now need to do is have it automatically fire up when we open the database as our initial form. So the best way to do that is to create a macro which has the open form action. We'll set that form to be form login, there you go, and we'll save it. But if you save it with a particular name, and that name is auto-execute, then let's see if it works. If we open up our database, it will automatically open the login form. Now it has actually opened up the contact list as well, so we'll just need to work out why that is. I believe it's because in the options you can set a default form to come up, but we don't want that. We want to set that to none, or we could set that to the login form. Let's just see if that works. So contacts, yeah. So as I say, you can either have it as a macro that runs this form up, or you can set it in your current database display form options. Either way is fine. I've always done it since 2003. I've always done it as an auto-exec macro. Hello again. Right, so things have moved on a bit. What I've done is I've changed the auto-exec function so that rather than open a form login, the login form, I've got it just running a piece of code, and the piece of code is called startup. And what I've done is I've created a module where there's a startup routine, a startup function here. And this does various things, which eventually it does include opening up the login form. One of the things it does is it tests that the back end is available. Because what can happen when you split the front end from the back end, sometimes that back end can go missing if it's on a network drive or a NAS drive. So it's quite nice to be able to test that as you launch the database. What it's doing here is it's calling a routine here called refresh links, and what that refresh links does is it goes through looking for the back-end tables, and if it has any difficulty finding them, then it opens up a dialog box. I'll show you the dialog box that it opens up, because I've put it on a button here, and this dialog box allows you then to find the back end. In this case it's here. When you select it, it closes the database. When you reopen, it will use that back end. So that's quite a neat feature. You don't really want it as a button though, of course. You just want it to run as part of your startup procedure before it launches the login form. Okay, so this is it here. So this is the code. Okay, and here's the test link feature, which will bring back an error and run the refresh links for you. And this is the module called functions, which contains all the code, including that Explorer style common dialog box, what's known as a common file open save dialog box. So all this code is going to be available for you to download, but that module there, the startup module, and the fact that the startup code runs those procedures to test the back end is there. That now gives you the ability to make sure you can establish a link with the back end from the front end. Okay, so moving on, I have added the functionality whereby multiple users over a network can use the database and pull up a record, make changes, but unless they hit save, nothing gets written back to the database. So in order to do that, what you're going to do is, here's the old code. So when you click on one of the IDs, it opens up the contact details form, and you can see that happening there. Open form, contact details. It passes the ID as an argument. When that form's open, there's a command that searches for that record and pulls it up. But we're going to get rid of all of that, and what we're going to do, the new code is, what happens is when you select that ID, you get a copy of the record pulled into a temporary table which your form is now based on, so that any changes that you make to that record, if you just escape out of it, nothing gets saved back to the database unless you hit the save button, which we'll do in the next video. The code for that is this. So what it does, it actually does a transfer database from the contacts table to a table called temp1 contacts. It only copies the structure, not all the data. So if you've got 2,000 contacts, it doesn't copy the entire table, just the structure, and then it inserts into that temporary table all the fields from the contacts table based on the ID that you chose, and then finally so it opens the contacts table, contact details, pulls the record in with one record, and then it sets that contact details form record source to that temporary table. So it looks something like this. Here's one, Steve. Here, I'm just going to just change that. Okay, Steve Manser, ID 27. So if I hit that, up comes the contact details form. It goes and gets the record ID 27 and plugs it in. Now, any changes I make here, unless I hit the save button, which we'll do in the next video, if I just close it, nothing gets written back to the database. That's great in a multi-user network environment. Okay, so now we're going to add the save button to the contact details form. so that any changes that we make here can be saved back to the live record. So let's just show you that. Okay, so I've put a button on the form here using the button control here, and I've called it command save, and I've built an event. And what that does is, well, you've got some record locking here. Very important in a multi-user environment when lots of people are saving back. You need to grab a lock on the table you're working with, do the save, and then release the lock for the next person, so it becomes a serial affair. What you also need to do is determine whether the save that you're making is an update or if you're adding a new record, and it simply does that by having a look at the ID that you've got, looks to see if it already exists in the database. If the ID exists, then it must be an update. If not, it's an add new. There's some code here that then builds up the update SQL statement or an insert into SQL statement if you're adding a record, by grabbing all the fields and all the changes and then saving them back. Down here you can see where it actually executes the SQL. That's an insert. Down here there's an update, and then finally it releases the lock. So whilst it's doing the save, it locks the table, locks the table so that the saves are made serially. So you also need a special table called table lock, which I've already created, which I'll now show you. Okay, this is the lock table. I'm just getting it in design view so you can see it properly. It's got 3 fields in it. There's an ID auto number field. There's a Boolean yes or no, true or false field. Is it busy or not? And there's the user that's associated, who's got the lock open. That's useful because if someone's doing a save and something happens, someone else tries to save 3 times in a row, it will tell you which user actually has got the lock open. So in a network environment, that's quite handy. So that's the locking table. So now you should get something like this. Let's check record 25. You can see there's no company associated with record 25, so I'm going to go into that. I'm just going to put Fred Blogs in there, and his company is called Acme Inc. Hit save, close that, and there we have the updated information written back to the database, but only when we hit save. So if I put his job title in there and then hit close, the job title doesn't come out. That's the essence of building a multi-user networked access database. So we completed the code there for the update. So if you pick an existing record and you try to update those, you click the save button, it finds the record in the database and writes back using SQL, writes back the update statement. What about insert? Okay, so let's give it a try. We're going to click new here. Now, because it's a new record, it's not an existing record, it doesn't bring anything up. But what I've got it to do is that if it's a new record, the ID that's passed is 0. When it does the decount to see if the record already exists, it's not going to find 0 as the ID.